As we come to the end of this course, it's likely that many of you are carrying a question, even if you've not yet put it into words. The question is probably not simply, what should I do next? I think it might be more fundamental than that. The question might be, what is God saying to me now as I end this course? Now, you've all been here from different contexts at different points in your vocation. Some of you may be exploring chaplaincy for the first time. This course may have named something you've sensed for a while, but not yet articulated. You may be wondering whether this work is something you're being drawn towards and what that might mean. Some of you may be newly practicing chaplains. You may be asking how what you've learned fit in with the realities of your role, your institution, your boundaries, your own limits. And some of you will be experienced chaplains, deeply embedded in your work. And for you, this course may have affirmed what you already know, or challenged assumptions, or stirred questions maybe about sustainability, focus, or direction. So discernment at this point is not about comparing ourselves with one another or assuming that everyone will be moving in the same direction. It's about listening for God's address to you in this season of your life and ministry. For some, God may be inviting you to step forward. For others, God may be inviting you to stay, to deepen, or even to narrow your focus. For others still, God may be inviting you to rest, to reset boundaries, or to let go of something that is no longer life-giving. Discernment begins not with abstract possibility, but with honest attention to where you are right now. A helpful starting question might be this: what has been stirred in me during this course? What has resonated? What has unsettled you? What have you found yourself returning to in prayer, or in conversation, or in moments of quiet? Rather than rushing to action, another grounding question might be, what do I need to learn in order to discern well at this point? Now, that learning might be theological, it might be practical, it might be organizational. It might involve understanding the realities of chaplaincy roles, or supervision structures, or safeguarding, or institutional expectations. Or it might involve learning something about yourself, your energy, your limits, your wounds, your desires. Discernment is not about having all the answers before we begin. It is, as you probably know, it is about allowing God to meet us on the ground that is already under our feet. So this journey of discernment does not need to begin somewhere else. It begins where you already are. Because you know Christ meets us in our actual lives, in our current place, in our current roles. Christ meets us in our questions. Christ meets us in our tiredness. And Christ meets us in our hopes and calls us from there. For some of you, this may mean recognizing that you are already being a healing presence in a significant way, even if you do not yet carry the title of chaplain. For others, it may mean acknowledging that you've been carrying more than is sustainable, and that faithfulness actually looks like reordering rather than expansion. So as we listen for what God is saying, there are several voices that we can tune into that can help us discern. One voice is the voice within. In the Ignatian tradition, we pay attention to our inner responses. What are you sensing inside? Do you sense a deepening feeling of peace or clarity or energy around a particular direction? If so, that may be worth trusting while continuing to move prayerfully and attentively. If instead you notice resistance or heaviness or exhaustion at the thought of taking on more, that voice deserves respect too. God's call is not always towards addition. Sometimes it is towards focus or restraint or release. Another inner voice to attend to is the voice of curiosity. Often God's invitations arrive not as fully formed plans, but as small sparks of interest. Something from the course may have caught your attention. If so, discernment may simply mean following that curiosity gently, without yet knowing where it will lead. There is also the voice of sorrow. Where do you find your heart most moved by suffering? What stories linger with you? What pain do you feel drawn towards? Often, though not always, our calling emerges at the intersection of compassion, experience, and gifting. Alongside these inner voices, Scripture remains a vital component and companion in discernment. One helpful practice is to spend time with the gospel healing stories, not to analyze them, but to inhabit them prayerfully. Notice where you place yourself in those stories. Notice what draws your attention. Notice what Jesus said or does that stays with you. So rather than asking, "What should I do?" you might ask, "What does this reveal about who Jesus is inviting me to be?" Discernment is also never meant to be done alone. The voice of others matter. Colleagues, supervisors, spiritual directors, trusted friends, or faith communities can often see things in us that we cannot see in ourselves. So how about asking a small number of trusted people a simple question such as, "What do you see God doing in me at this moment?" And that can be surprisingly clarifying. Finally, it's important to remember that discernment does not always result in dramatic change. Sometimes the discernment at the end of a course is simply this: continue, but with deeper wisdom. Continue, but with better boundaries. Continue, but with a renewed trust that God is at work, even when the results are unseen. At other times, discernment may lead to new stuff, new conversations, further training, a shift in role, or a reimagining how chaplaincy is lived out in your context. Whatever the outcome, the invitation is the same for all of us to listen attentively to what God is saying to you now. Not to rush, not to compare, and not to assume that faithfulness looks the same for everyone. But to trust that God, who has met you in this course, will continue to meet you as you take your next step, whatever that step may be. And to remember that discernment itself is not a detour from vocation. It's a deep part of it.